In 1882, the Arizona Territory was a land where mercy could mean death, and a single act of kindness could either start a war or end one forever. When cowboy Jake Morrison pulled a bleeding Apache girl from the rushing waters of the Rio Verde, he had no idea that by dawn, 300 warriors would surround his ranch with war paint on their faces and vengeance in their hearts. This is the true story of how one moment of compassion changed the fate of an entire territory. Stay with me through all 4 chapters of this incredible journey, because the ending will leave you speechless. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Jake Morrison's weathered face as he guided his horse along the banks of the Rio Verde. At 52, Jake had seen enough death and violence to last 10 lifetimes. His ranch, a modest spread of cattle and hardship, sat 3 miles upstream, a testament to his stubborn refusal to be driven out by Apache raids, drought, or the crushing loneliness that had settled on his shoulders like desert dust. The river ran higher than usual this late September morning, swollen by the previous night's flash flood. Jake was checking for damage to his downstream fencing when he heard it, a sound that made his blood run cold. Not the cry of a wounded animal, but something far more heart-wrenching. The weak whimper of a human being in distress. He spurred his horse forward, following the sound around a bend where cottonwoods cast dancing shadows on the muddy water. There, caught against a fallen log, was a sight that stopped him cold. A young Apache girl, no more than 16, lay half submerged in the rushing water. Blood streamed from a gash on her forehead, mixing with the river's murky flow. Her traditional deerskin dress was torn and sodden, and her long black hair floated like dark silk around her unconscious face. For a moment, Jake hesitated. Every instinct honed by 20 years on the frontier screamed at him to ride away. The Apache had been at war with the white settlers for as long as he could remember. Just 6 months ago, they had burned out the Peterson family 40 miles south, leaving nothing but charred timber and shallow graves. Getting involved with an Apache, even a wounded girl, was asking for trouble of the deadliest kind. But as he watched her small form being battered by the current, Jake Morrison discovered something about himself he thought had died years ago. Beneath the hardened exterior of a frontier rancher still beat the heart of a man who couldn't watch another human being suffer. "Damn my conscience," he muttered, urging his horse into the water. The current was stronger than it looked. Jake's horse struggled against the flow as he reached for the girl, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he pulled her free from the log's embrace. She was lighter than he expected, her body cold and limp as death itself. For a terrifying moment, he thought he was too late. Then she coughed, water spilling from her lips as her chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate breaths. "Easy there, little one," Jake whispered, though he doubted she could hear him. "You're safe now." He wrapped her in his own coat and settled her across his saddle, her head resting against his arm. The ride back to his ranch seemed to take forever, every movement of the horse threatening to jostle her back into unconsciousness. Jake found himself talking to her, nonsense words meant to keep her tethered to the world of the living. "Name's Jake Morrison," he said, as they climbed the hill toward his modest log cabin. "Got a place up here where you can rest. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry. Got some medical supplies too, learned a bit about doctoring during the war." The girl's eyelids fluttered, and for just a moment, Jake caught a glimpse of dark eyes filled with pain and confusion before they closed again. His ranch house sat in a small valley protected by red rock formations on 3 sides. It wasn't much to look at, a single-story log structure with a sagging porch and a roof that leaked when the rains came hard. But it had been home for 15 years, ever since he'd staked his claim on this piece of Arizona territory that nobody else wanted. Jake carried the girl inside, laying her carefully on his own bed. In the lamplight, he could see the full extent of her injuries. Besides the head wound, there were scrapes and bruises covering her arms and legs, and her right ankle was swollen to twice its normal size. But she was breathing steadily now, and color was returning to her copper-toned skin. He heated water on his wood stove and gathered what medical supplies he had, mostly leftover bandages from his army days and a bottle of whiskey that would have to serve as antiseptic. As he cleaned the wound on her forehead, she stirred, her eyes opening to fix on his face with startling intensity. "Easy," Jake said softly. "You're hurt pretty bad. Found you in the river." She tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper emerged. Jake brought water to her lips, supporting her head as she drank greedily. "Gracias," she whispered, the Spanish word surprising him. "You speak English?" Jake asked. She nodded weakly. "Little. Learn at mission school." "What's your name?" "Ayana," she whispered. "Means eternal blossom. That's a pretty name. I'm Jake. You're safe here, Ayana. Rest now." As if his words had given her permission, her eyes closed and her breathing deepened into the sleep of exhaustion. Jake pulled a chair beside the bed and settled in to watch over her, his rifle within easy reach. He couldn't shake the feeling that saving this girl's life was going to complicate his own in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, a sound that seemed to carry a warning on the desert wind. Jake woke with a start as the first rays of dawn crept through his cabin windows. He'd dozed in the chair beside the bed, his rifle across his lap, but Ayana appeared to have slept peacefully through the night. Her breathing was stronger, and the dangerous pallor had left her face. She stirred as sunlight touched her features, wincing as she tried to sit up. "Take it slow," Jake cautioned, moving to help her. "That head wound's still fresh." Ayana accepted his assistance, her dark eyes studying his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. There was something ancient in that gaze, as if she could see straight through to his soul. "Why?" she asked simply. Jake knew what she meant. "Because you needed help. Your people. My people." She gestured helplessly, the futility of their situation hanging between them like morning mist. "Right now there's just us," Jake replied, bringing her water and the stew he'd warmed on the stove. "Eat something. You need to build your strength." As Ayana ate, Jake found himself studying her features in the growing light. She was beautiful in the way desert flowers are beautiful, delicate yet resilient, shaped by harsh conditions into something uniquely striking. But there was something else, a quality in her bearing that spoke of importance, of significance beyond her years. "Your family will be looking for you," Jake said. It wasn't quite a question. Ayana's hand stilled on the spoon, and her eyes grew distant. "Father. Father is chief, war chief of Red Mountain Band." Jake felt his blood turn to ice water in his veins. Chief Red Eagle of the Red Mountain Apaches was legendary throughout the territory, a warrior who had never been defeated in battle, who had sworn to drive every white man from Apache lands or die trying. And Jake Morrison had just rescued his daughter. "Lord Almighty," Jake breathed. "Your father is Red Eagle." Ayana nodded solemnly. "He will come for me. Many warriors will come. How did you end up in that river? What happened to you?" For a long moment, Ayana was silent, staring into the depths of her coffee cup. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Running away," she said, "from marriage to Iron Wolf." Jake had heard that name too. Iron Wolf was Red Eagle's lieutenant, a brutal warrior known for collecting scalps and showing no mercy to his enemies. The thought of this gentle girl being forced to marry such a man made Jake's jaw clench with unexpected anger. "He is bad man," Ayana continued, struggling with the English words. "Cruel, kills for pleasure. Father says marriage will make Iron Wolf loyal, but I cannot. So you ran." She nodded. "In night, but horse spooked by snake, threw me into river, hit rocks." She touched the bandage on her forehead gingerly. "Thought I would die there." Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing what she'd told him. He understood now why she'd been in the water, but it didn't change their current predicament. If anything, it made it worse. "They'll track you here," he said finally. "Yes, soon. Then we need to get you back to them before—" "No!" Ayana's eyes flashed with fierce determination. "Not go back. Rather die than marry Iron Wolf." The vehemence in her voice surprised Jake. He'd seen that same look in the eyes of cornered wildcats, desperate, defiant, ready to fight to the death rather than submit. "There has to be another way," he said. "No other way. Apache law is final. Father's word is law." Jake stood and walked to the window, peering out at the peaceful valley that had been his sanctuary for so many years. In the distance, dust clouds were beginning to rise on the eastern horizon. His heart sank as he realized what they meant. "Ayana," he said quietly, "I think they've found us." She joined him at the window, moving carefully on her injured ankle. Together they watched as the dust clouds grew larger, resolving into the shapes of mounted riders moving fast across the desert floor. Even at this distance, Jake could see the sun glinting off weapons and the bright colors of war paint. "How many?" Ayana whispered. Jake counted grimly. "More than I can handle alone. Maybe 300. Ayana's face went pale. All the warriors of 3 bands. "Father called in war debt. This is declaration of war. Against one man?" She turned to look at him, and Jake saw tears gathering in her dark eyes. "Against man who stole Chief's daughter. They think you take me, dishonor me." The full implications hit Jake like a physical blow. By rescuing Ayana, he had inadvertently committed what the Apache would consider an unforgivable offense. In their eyes, he was now a kidnapper and defiler of their chief's daughter. There would be no explaining, no negotiating. They would kill him slowly and painfully, as an example to any other white man who dared touch an Apache woman. "I have to take you back to them," Jake said. "Explain what really happened. They will not listen. We'll kill you first, ask questions after." Jake looked out at the approaching war party, his mind racing through possibilities. He could try to run, but his horse was no match for Apache ponies across desert terrain. He could try to hide, but 300 warriors would search every rock and crevice until they found him. Or he could stand and fight, 1 man against 300. It would be suicide, but at least he'd die on his own terms. "There is one way," Ayana said hesitantly. Jake turned to her. "What?" "Challenge. By Apache law, if accused man claims innocence, he can demand trial by combat. If he wins, he goes free. And if he loses," Ayana's voice was barely audible, "death, but quick death. Warrior's death." Jake looked out at the approaching riders, now close enough that he could make out individual figures. At their head rode a massive warrior painted for war, his face a mask of fury and vengeance. Red Eagle, coming for his daughter and the man who had stolen her. "One warrior against me?" Jake asked. "No," Ayana replied, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Apache law for this crime. You must fight Iron Wolf." The war party arrived like a dust devil made flesh, 300 Apache warriors spreading out to surround Jake's ranch in a perfect circle of death. The thunder of hooves gave way to an ominous silence, broken only by the jingling of weapons and the snorting of winded horses. At their center rode Chief Red Eagle himself, and Jake felt his blood chill as he got his first close look at the legendary warrior. Red Eagle was a giant of a man, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to bear the weight of his people's hopes and fears. War paint streaked his bronze face in patterns that spoke of sacred rituals and righteous anger. Eagle feathers adorned his long black hair, and a necklace of bear claws marked him as a warrior who had faced death countless times and emerged victorious. Beside him rode Iron Wolf, and Jake understood immediately why Ayana had preferred death to marriage with this man. Where Red Eagle carried himself with the dignity of a natural leader, Iron Wolf radiated cruelty like heat from a forge. Scars crisscrossed his face and arms, some from battle, others clearly self-inflicted ritual markings. His eyes held the flat, emotionless stare of a man who had killed so often that human life had lost all meaning to him. "Stay behind me," Jake told Ayana as he stepped onto his front porch, his hands deliberately empty and visible. "Great Chief Red Eagle," Jake called out, his voice carrying across the silent valley. "I am Jacob Morrison. I have your daughter. She is safe and unharmed." Red Eagle's horse danced sideways as the chief studied Jake with eyes like black obsidian. When he spoke, his English was precise and coldly formal, the voice of a man who had learned his enemy's language the better to defeat them. "White man Morrison, you have taken what belongs to me. You have brought dishonor to the daughter of Red Eagle. For this crime there is only one punishment." "I took nothing," Jake replied firmly. "I found your daughter dying in the river. I saved her life." A ripple of harsh laughter ran through the assembled warriors. Iron Wolf urged his horse forward, his hand resting on the handle of a tomahawk stained dark with old blood. "The white dog lies," Iron Wolf snarled. "He steals woman, keeps her in his lodge all night. She is ruined, worthless." "Let her speak for herself," Jake challenged. Red Eagle's expression didn't change, but he nodded slightly. Ayana stepped forward, moving carefully on her injured ankle. Jake heard several warriors intake breath sharply as they saw the bandages and her obvious injuries. "Father," Ayana said in Apache, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. What followed was a rapid exchange in the Apache language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he could read the emotions playing across Red Eagle's face. Surprise, concern, and then growing anger as Ayana told her story. She gestured toward Jake several times, and her voice rose passionately as she continued speaking. Iron Wolf interrupted her with a harsh bark of words that made Ayana recoil as if she'd been slapped. Several other warriors nodded agreement with whatever he'd said. "My daughter tells interesting story," Red Eagle said finally, switching back to English. "Says she ran from marriage. Says you found her in water, saved her life. But Iron Wolf speaks truth also. She spent night in Lodge of White Man. By Apache law she is dishonored. Cannot be wife to war chief." "That's barbaric," Jake said before he could stop himself. The temperature in the valley seemed to drop 20 degrees. Iron Wolf's hand tightened on his tomahawk, and several warriors reached for their weapons. "You dare speak of Apache law?" Red Eagle's voice was deadly quiet. "You who know nothing of honor, nothing of the old ways?" Jake realized he'd made a potentially fatal mistake. These men lived by ancient codes that demanded respect, even from enemies. Insulting their traditions was tantamount to spitting in their faces. "I meant no disrespect to your ways, Chief Red Eagle," Jake said carefully. "But your daughter's honor was never touched. She was unconscious most of the time, badly injured. I cared for her as I would care for any hurt creature, with compassion, nothing more." Red Eagle studied Jake for a long moment, then looked at his daughter. Ayana spoke again in Apache, her voice urgent and pleading. Jake caught the word Iron Wolf several times, and each time she said it, her voice carried unmistakable fear and revulsion. "My daughter confirms your words," Red Eagle said slowly. "You did not touch her in the way of man and woman, but this changes nothing. Apache law is clear. Unmarried woman cannot spend night in Lodge of Man who is not family. Whether by choice or by accident, the law has been broken." "Then what happens now?" Jake asked, though he was pretty sure he didn't want to hear the answer. "Now you die," Iron Wolf said with obvious satisfaction. "Slowly, Apache way." "Wait," Jake said quickly. "Your daughter mentioned something about a challenge, trial by combat." Red Eagle's eyes narrowed. "You know of this law." "She told me. One warrior, fair fight. If I win, I go free. And if you lose, you die anyway." Iron Wolf laughed, but quicker, less screaming. "Apache law allows this," Red Eagle confirmed. "But warrior you fight is chosen by wronged party. Iron Wolf has right to claim combat." Jake looked at the scarred warrior and felt his mouth go dry. Iron Wolf was younger, stronger, and had spent his entire life learning the art of killing. Jake was a middle-aged rancher whose fighting days were supposed to be behind him. But as he looked at Ayana's face, saw the hope and fear warring in her dark eyes, Jake knew he had no choice. "I accept the challenge," he said. Iron Wolf's grin was the most frightening thing Jake had ever seen. "Good, we fight now, to death." Red Eagle held up a hand. "Apache law requires fair combat. Weapons must be equal. You choose, knives, tomahawks, or hand-to-hand." Jake considered his options. Iron Wolf would have the advantage with any traditional Apache weapon, but Jake had learned a few things during his army days and later in the rough saloons and mining camps of the frontier. "Hand-to-hand," Jake said. "No weapons." Iron Wolf's grin widened. "Even better. I will enjoy breaking you with my bare hands." The warriors formed a large circle, chanting in low voices that seemed to make the very air vibrate with tension. Red Eagle dismounted and walked to the center of the circle, raising his arms for silence. "By the old laws, by the sacred ways of our fathers, let combat decide truth from lies, honor from shame. The man who lives will be judged right by the spirits. The man who dies will have his soul weighed and found wanting." Jake stripped off his shirt and handed his gun belt to Ayana. As their hands touched, she whispered urgently in his ear, "Iron Wolf fights like wild animal. Uses teeth, claws, anything. No honor in him. You must be smarter, not stronger." Jake nodded grimly and walked into the circle. Iron Wolf was already there, stripped to the waist, his scarred body gleaming with bear grease. He was even more intimidating up close, pure muscle and sinew with the easy balance of a natural predator. "Ready to die, white man?" Iron Wolf asked quietly. "We'll see," Jake replied. Red Eagle raised his hand, then brought it down sharply. Iron Wolf attacked like a mountain cat, all speed and fury. His first blow would have taken Jake's head off if he hadn't ducked at the last second. The warrior's fist whistled through empty air, and Jake grabbed his extended arm using Iron Wolf's own momentum to throw him to the ground. The crowd roared approval. Apparently they respected good technique, even from their enemy. Iron Wolf rolled away and came up snarling. This time he approached more cautiously, circling Jake like a predator stalking prey. When he attacked again, it was with a series of lightning-fast strikes that pushed Jake back toward the edge of the circle. Jake gave ground, absorbing punishment to his ribs and shoulders while looking for an opening. Iron Wolf was stronger and faster, but he was also overconfident. He telegraphed his moves just slightly, and Jake began to time his responses. When Iron Wolf committed to a powerful uppercut that would have shattered Jake's jaw, the rancher stepped sideways and drove his elbow into the warrior's solar plexus. Iron Wolf doubled over, gasping, and Jake followed up with a knee to the chest that sent the Apache sprawling. But Iron Wolf recovered quickly, sweeping Jake's legs and sending him crashing to the ground. Before Jake could move, Iron Wolf was on top of him, hands closing around his throat with crushing force. Jake's vision began to darken as Iron Wolf's thumbs pressed into his windpipe. The warrior's face was inches above his own, twisted with homicidal rage. "Die, white dog," Iron Wolf hissed. "Die knowing you failed." With his last conscious thought, Jake remembered something Ayanna had said. Iron Wolf fights like wild animal, uses teeth, claws, anything. No honor in him. If Iron Wolf fought without honor, then Jake would have to do the same. Jake drove his thumbs into Iron Wolf's eyes with every ounce of strength he had left. Iron Wolf's scream of pain and fury echoed across the valley as he released Jake's throat and clawed at his damaged eyes. Jake gasped for air and rolled away, his vision clearing just in time to see Iron Wolf coming at him again, this time with a knife that had seemingly appeared from nowhere. The crowd of warriors erupted in angry shouts. Several raised their weapons, but Red Eagle's commanding voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Hold!" the chief roared. "Iron Wolf breaks sacred law. Combat was to be without weapons." But Iron Wolf was beyond hearing. Blood streamed from his wounded eyes as he slashed wildly at Jake, the knife cutting through empty air as Jake dodged desperately. The warrior was fighting blind now, relying on instinct and rage, which made him even more dangerous. Jake couldn't keep dodging forever. His throat felt like it had been crushed and he was already exhausted from the fight. He needed to end this quickly. As Iron Wolf lunged forward in another wild attack, Jake sidestepped and grabbed the warrior's knife hand, twisting sharply. The bone snapped with an audible crack, and the knife fell to the ground. Before Iron Wolf could react, Jake drove his fist into the warrior's temple with every ounce of strength he had left. Iron Wolf collapsed and lay still. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake stood swaying over his opponent's motionless form, blood streaming from a dozen cuts, his breath coming in harsh gasps. Around the circle, 300 Apache warriors stared at him in stunned silence. Red Eagle walked slowly into the center of the circle and knelt beside Iron Wolf. After a moment, he looked up at Jake. "Iron Wolf lives, but he is finished as a warrior. You have defeated him fairly, even though he broke sacred law by using a weapon." The chief's voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. "By Apache law, you are judged innocent of the crimes charged against you. You may go free." Jake nodded, too exhausted to speak. He started to turn away when Red Eagle's voice stopped him. "But there is still matter of my daughter." Jake felt his heart sink. He'd won the combat, but Ayanna's situation hadn't changed. She was still considered dishonored by Apache law, still facing a forced marriage to a man she despised. Or worse. "What will happen to her?" Jake asked. Red Eagle's expression was carved from stone. "She cannot marry Iron Wolf now. He is broken, useless. But she has been dishonored. No Apache warrior will take her as wife. She is lost to us." "That's not right," Jake said, his voice growing stronger despite his injuries. "She did nothing wrong. She was injured, unconscious." "How is that dishonor?" "You do not understand Apache ways," Red Eagle replied coldly. "Law is law. It protects the people, keeps order. Without law, we become like animals." Jake looked at Ayanna, who stood at the edge of the circle with tears streaming down her face. In that moment, He made a decision that surprised even himself. "Then let me take her as my wife." The words seemed to hang in the desert air like a physical thing. Every warrior in the circle turned to stare at Jake, their faces showing everything from shock to outrage. Red Eagle's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "You would marry Apache woman, live with Apache law, accept Apache ways? If that's what it takes to protect her, yes." "Jake, no," Ayana whispered, stepping forward. "You don't understand what you say. Marriage to Apache woman means you become part of tribe, must follow all Apache laws, all Apache customs. Cannot return to white man's world." Jake looked at her, seeing the fear and hope warring in her dark eyes. He thought about his lonely ranch, his empty cabin, the years stretching ahead with nothing but solitude and regret for company. "Maybe it's time I became part of something bigger than myself," he said quietly. Red Eagle studied Jake for a long moment, his obsidian eyes seeming to peer into the white man's soul. Finally he spoke. "Apache marriage is not white man's marriage. Husband must prove himself worthy, must show he can provide for wife, protect her, honor her family. Are you prepared for this?" "I am. And you, daughter?" Red Eagle turned to Ayana. "This man saved your life, fought for your honor. Will you accept him as husband?" Ayana walked slowly to Jake's side, her eyes never leaving his face. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "He is good man, kind man. He risked his life for stranger, asked for nothing in return. If he will have me, I will be honored to be his wife." Red Eagle nodded slowly. "Then let it be done, but know this, white man. If you ever harm my daughter, if you dishonor her or treat her badly, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Do you understand?" "I understand," Jake replied, "and I give you my word. I'll protect her with my life." What followed was unlike any wedding ceremony Jake had ever witnessed. The warriors formed a large circle around him and Ayana, while Red Eagle spoke in Apache, his voice rising and falling in ancient rhythms that seemed to call upon the spirits of earth and sky. Ayana translated quietly for Jake, explaining the vows they were taking, promises of fidelity, protection, and mutual respect that went far beyond anything he'd heard in a Christian church. When the ceremony was complete, Red Eagle presented Jake with a magnificent horse, a paint stallion that would have been worth a fortune in any town. "Wedding gift," the chief explained, "and symbol. You are now my son, part of my family. Your enemies are my enemies. Your troubles are my troubles." Jake felt overwhelmed by the unexpected generosity. "Chief Red Eagle, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing. Prove yourself with actions, not words. Show my people that some white men can be trusted." As the sun began to set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Apache war party prepared to depart. But the mood had changed completely from the morning's tension. Warriors who had come seeking vengeance now approached Jake with curiosity and cautious respect. Several offered their hands in friendship, while others presented small gifts, arrowheads, strips of jerky, a beautifully carved flute. Red Eagle was the last to leave. He embraced his daughter tenderly, speaking to her in Apache with obvious emotion. Then he turned to Jake. "You have given me great gift today," the chief said quietly. "What gift is that?" "You have shown me that honor exists in all people, regardless of skin color. That courage and compassion are not the property of any one race." Red Eagle clasped Jake's shoulder with a grip like iron. "This is lesson I will not forget. Perhaps there is hope for peace between our peoples after all." As the war party rode away into the gathering darkness, Jake and Ayana stood together on the porch of the cabin that was now their home. The desert stars were beginning to appear, brilliant diamonds scattered across black velvet. "No regrets?" Ayana asked softly. Jake pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms. "None. What about you?" "I am free," she whispered. "For first time in my life, truly free. And I am with man who risked everything for stranger. How could I have regrets?" In the distance, a coyote howled, but this time the sound carried no warning. Instead, it seemed to sing of new beginnings, of two worlds coming together, and of love found in the most unlikely of circumstances. Jake Morrison had pulled a bleeding girl from the river, expecting nothing but trouble. Instead, he had found redemption, purpose, and a love that would bridge the gap between two cultures. And as he held his Apache bride under the vast Arizona sky, He knew that sometimes the best things in life came disguised as the most dangerous. The next morning would bring new challenges, learning Apache customs, building trust with Ayana's people, and proving himself worthy of the gift he'd been given. But for now, in this perfect moment, Jake was content to simply hold the woman who had changed his life forever and watch the stars wheel overhead in their eternal dance. The story would be told around Apache campfires for generations to come. The tale of the cowboy who saved a chief's daughter and gained not just a wife, but a family, a purpose, and a chance to heal the wounds between two worlds. And in the end, that was worth more than all the gold in the Arizona Territory.